The dogs run fast.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into my dog's favorite podcast, the Dynasty Dogs, brought to you by the FFU. That is the double FU for you. I am your host for this evening, and as you can see, the only person here, Michael Anthony. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of news that's happening around the league as we get into the start of the season that's coming up very, very shortly. So let's get right into it. This will probably be a shorter episode than normal, especially since I don't really want to be talking to myself for too damn long. So let's get right into the news and notes. That is our That Bites segment. First off, we got the information that just came down maybe within the past hour or two. That's going to be Brian Robinson traded to the 49ers for a 6th-round pick in 2026. This, to me, is nothing more than a backup move for CMC. This is the Jordan Mason guy that they're bringing in, a good between the tackles runner, 4 yards in a cloud of dust, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, whatever you want to call it, goal line work type, running back. If someone is trying to flip this on you as to you should be concerned about CMC because of the Brian Robinson trade, it's a trap. Don't fall into it. Don't let somebody swindle you into a potential, RB1 in CMC because of the news of Brian Robinson becoming the backup there. I obviously think this puts a real damper on a guy in Jordan James, the running back from Oregon from last year, I believe a 5th-round pick off the top of my head. A good running back, a very solid running back. I know he's had some injuries throughout this preseason, this training camp. I'd still hold on to him just because they did just draft him. He's still going to have a role. I believe Brian Robinson's contract is up at the end of the season, if I'm not mistaken. So that's somebody I would hold on to. Isaac Guerendo, though, I don't think he's relevant at all. I've never been a real Isaac Guerendo believer. I believe I talked about it on here in a Selves episode a few months ago, possibly, when it comes to Guerendo. He did a lot of his dirty work against bad rush defenses last season. So I don't have a whole lot of faith in him. I think that Jordan James is a good stash for next year, maybe even some work this year if anything happens to both either Brian Robinson or CMC. But CMC is still the lead dog in this offense. They are down a plethora of pass catchers. They are down pretty much every position you could possibly think of. Running back's been injured. There's been suspension. Demarcus Robinson was suspended. You've got injuries to everybody but Ricky Pearsall right now. So CMC, I still think, is going to be super productive in this offense, especially as the pass catcher. We'll talk about the Washington Commanders side of this a little bit later on because I forgot to mention at the top of this episode. I'm going to be breaking down the NFC East in this episode, so obviously we'll get more into that as we go on. The next bit of news here, Daniel Jones named the starter for the Indianapolis Colts. Man, this one hurts the soul a little bit. I'm an Anthony Richardson truther. I don't think he's gotten the fairest shake from this organization. Obviously, a top 4 pick just a few years ago. Obviously, some of this is a little bit on himself with the injuries and the tapping himself out in the middle of the game. So you can't really, fault the organization for that. But to me, this is a guy you drafted in the top 4. You need to give him every opportunity to show that he is not the guy. And everything I've read this offseason is that, Daniel Jones isn't light years ahead of him. He's not, completely taken this job. It's kind of been neck and neck for the most part. So why not put the young quarterback with tremendous upside out there to see what you really have? You're not going to be a very good football team this year, right? So why not, if you're going to lose out with the stud and see what you have instead of, being bad with a bad quarterback in Daniel Jones in reality. So for dynasty purposes, if you could get Anthony Richardson for like a third or something like that, maybe even a late second, I'd still just hold. I think he's going to get another opportunity with either the Colts or with another football team. The Shane Steichen came out and said that this is, Daniel Jones's job for the year. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. Shane Steichen needs to fucking coach up for his job, right? So he's going to give himself every opportunity to show something. And I don't think Daniel Jones is there to save his job whatsoever. When it comes to Daniel Jones and his dynasty value, I'm moving off of him. I don't believe if you could still get a second for him at this point, I would absolutely do it, even in super flex leagues. I don't think this is a top 15 fantasy scorer. I don't think this is a top 18 guy. I think he's going to be borderline in the 20s. And obviously, he's got some rushing upside, but he's just a tremendously bad pass thrower of the football. So I don't necessarily believe in him. Does this, raise the tides for some of the pass catchers in this offense? Yes and no, because I really don't think he's that much of an upgrade over Anthony Richardson in all reality. He's still a bad quarterback for a reason. The Giants gave up on him as a first-round quarterback after just 3 years. So it's not like this is, the rising tides raising the ships here. I think best case scenario, this helps Tyler Warren, a guy I've been talking about, just last week. I just don't buy it. I don't buy that this is an upgrade for the Colts. I don't buy that this is an upgrade as for the fantasy pass catchers. I do think this actually isn't bad for Jonathan Taylor. This is going to be a guy who's going to get the full workhorse role. Maybe defenses fall into the trap that Daniel Jones is a good quarterback. I don't know. I think Jonathan Taylor still has top 12 upside. He's not the best pass catcher. He's not really used in that matter. I think he is a decent pass catcher. He's not used. This is a guy that could, rush for 1,200, 8 TDs, 10 TDs, and still be a top guy. I really believe that, especially this year. So Daniel Jones, not really on my radar. If you want to throw a third out there for Anthony Richardson, if that's available to you in Superflex leagues, I would take the shot in the dark on that just to see what you have. You could stash him, see if he gets moved during the season or at the end of the season. So I think it's a good shot in the dark. All third-round picks, late seconds, or shots in the darks anyway. You might as well take a chance on a guy who got top four capital. A bit of news I read getting ready for this episode is Zach Charbonnet is pushing for a timeshare in Seattle. And that has kind of been what I've been trying to say on this show. I think Zach Charbonnet is a very good running back, a quality running back. He doesn't have the upside of a Kenneth Walker. He also doesn't have the injuries of a Kenneth Walker. Could I see this going down the realm of a 55-45 split? Absolutely. A 50-50 split? Absolutely. Zach Charbonnet being, I think, a very underrated pass catcher, a good in-between the tackles runner. And then you got a guy in Kenneth Walker who can also catch passes and is an explosive playmaker. It's just with Ken Walker, he just started practicing again with some injury concerns for him as well. You can't really depend on him week to week, month to month, year to year. So Charbonnet for me has been a priority add, a priority stash, a priority, handcuff, whatever words you want to say, because of the injuries to Ken Walker and the offense that they are running in Seattle. It's a run-first offense. I think that Ken Walker and Charbonnet complement each other super well. I think Charbonnet could, if he does get that 50-50 role, could be an RB2, a guy who gets, RB20, RB18, just because of the way he can catch the football and get that goal line work, short-yarded situations. I don't think he's the most elusive guy, but I think he's got some movement. Again, Ken Walker, if he is a full go, if he's fully healthy, he could be top 15 scorer. Just because of the big playability. You just can't depend on that. It's unfortunate because there are a lot of Ken Walker believers out there. I am kind of a guy who is 50-50 on him. If he is the best option on the board for me, then maybe. I'd rather probably go other directions, other positions. If Ken Walker is the only running back that I could get, And if I have Ken Walker, I have to have Zach Charbonnet. I have to have somebody behind him in that running back rotation because, again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but, he's just a guy you can't really depend on week to week. Next little bit of news, Devon Vele traded to the Saints. I have no idea exactly what the Saints are doing. They sent a 4th and 7th round pick for Vele, who is an older, he's 27 years old. He just had his rookie season. Obviously, he is, he's a bit older for a second-year wide receiver. Vele's a guy, maybe he was on your waivers. Maybe he was cut this offseason because there's been a plethora of wide receivers and pass catchers added to Denver. So maybe somebody cut Vele. If you want to add him off your waiver wire, absolutely throw some fab out there. This is not a guy I'm trading for. I am not the Saints. I am not trading a 4th and a 7th. That's basically dynasty trade value for Vele. I'm not really interested. At best, he is the 4th, 5th best pass catcher on that offense, and an offense that the quarterback situation is a big question mark. You got Chris Olave when healthy. He's the one. Shaheed has shown that he could be a competent 2. Alvin Kamara, honestly, probably is the best pass catcher in that offense just because of the way he can game break. And then you got Juwan Johnson, who maybe somewhat, who knows. So I still think Vele is probably the 4th option there above Juwan. But Vele is a guy who's going to be in the slot. That's what he did back when he was at Denver. I have really no interest, especially anyone really outside of Alvin Kamara in that offense. I have no interest in acquiring. I had some hope for Shuck. If you've listened, I liked Shuck. I like his ability as a passer. I liked his arm talent. He made some nice plays on his tape at Louisville. They drafted him in the 2nd round. That kind of piqued my interest slightly a bit more. There was a lot of negative buzz around him because he went ahead of Shador. And I agree, Shador should have went ahead of Shuck, but that's just not what happened. The Saints put their chips in on him with this early-ish 2nd round pick. So I thought, this would look pretty good. Obviously, as of right now, neither quarterback to me with Spencer Rattler or Shuck has looked very good. So I'm kind of avoiding this offense altogether. In 2026, it could be a little bit different. Just really depends on what quarterbacks come into the draft next year. Because I think the Saints are going to have a top pick. They don't have a very good defense. Their offense, as of right now, as it stands, is held on by a Band-Aid. I think Kellen Moore put himself in a pretty bad position right now with their cap situation, with the talent that they have. And then just trading a 4th and a 7th for Vele is just very surprising because that's not really what I saw his trade value being in the NFL market. But the NFL surprises us every now and again when it comes to trades. We've seen Jonathan Mingo move for a very similar price point. Again, this is just an offense I'm kind of avoiding. Vele really has, other than fab additions or waiver claims, and yeah, you might as well give it a shot and see what happens because it's free. Trade value, none. Anyone other than Alvin Kamara really is no interest to me. A little bit of other news that we came out yesterday was Chris Godwin was taken off of the PUP list, which was kind of surprising to people because they didn't really foresee this happening. He got his knee destroyed last season in the middle of the year. I believe it was week 6, week 7. So it was a very disgusting injury. I watched it live. I was kind of terrified, to be honest with you. This is a guy who, they're talking about possibly playing before week 5. So that obviously leaves 5 weeks there that he could be activated. Obviously he's off the PUP. Does not mean he's going to play those first few weeks. But I am honestly interested in sending a 2nd round pick for Chris Godwin, testing the waters on a contending team. Because this is a guy who's 28, 29 years old, who's been productive. He's been a wide receiver too in a pass-heavy offense with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. I love Emeka Egbuka, right? And I think Emeka is going to look good in the beginning of the season. I think Emeka Egbuka is going to have a very solid year, but Chris Godwin and Baker Mayfield have a connection. We saw it in the beginning of the season last year. Unfortunately, just ended very abruptly. I think at the end of the season, in those, week 11 through week 16, 17, where, you're trying to get into the playoffs and you're in the playoffs, I think Chris Godwin could be a very important piece. Now, do I think his value kind of skyrockets at any point during this season, even when he comes back? No, not really. But I'm interested in trading for him and putting him on my injury list on my teams because, yes, he's activated from the pup, but he's still not going to play the first few weeks. So just stash him on your injured section of your rosters. If hopefully you have that. But this is a dude who could come in and be a wide receiver too. Fantasy scorer then that back half of the season when you need him most, especially on contending rosters. But I would do it now. It's probably still a mid to late second for him. Probably gets it done. Maybe you need to throw a third in there. I'm all for doing that. Again, it's at the end of the day, we all want these rookies to hit. We all want these rookies to be, we all want our dart throws in the third round. But at the end of the day, it's about winning. And those end of the second, third round picks are not really going to do much for you as a contender. So why not get a guy in Chris Godwin in a pass first offense with Baker Mayfield, who has been super productive before. We've seen it. We know it. I'm all in on Chris Godwin. I've said it here multiple times. I think Baker is good enough to feed 2 to 3 pass catchers, in Mike Evans, Emeka, and Godwin. But again, I just believe Godwin is, one of Baker's guys. He's had him for 2 years now at quarterback or at wide receiver. So I think that's going to continue on. And it's a cheap dart throw at this point. In reality, mid-second, late second, it's a dart throw. So why not take it on a veteran wide receiver in a very good offense? Now, let's get into our dog tags and DogHouse for the NFC East. But let's first talk about the NFC East and the big conundrum that is it right now, outside of really the Philadelphia Eagles, my team that I support, thankfully, the former Super Bowl champions coming off of last year, or the contending Super Bowl champions rather. The Washington Commanders are trading away running backs. They have Terry McLaurin, who has asked to be traded. I don't understand what's happening there. They got Dallas, who is in a world of problems with Micah Parsons. I do think that they eventually figure that part out, but I don't know why they haven't as of yet. Jerry Jones is going on a media tour, just, saying that, they've tried and it's just not getting done. You need to shut up. You need to pay that guy what he's due. He's a top, defensive player in the league, top player in the league for that matter. So pay him, Jerry, or actually as an Eagles fan, don't pay him, trade him somewhere else. But if you're, if you're being dumb, don't pay him. And then you've got the New York Giants, who have a very good defensive line. Let's talk about that for a second. Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence. There's just a very formidable line. It's just they got to figure out the offensive line, the opposite side of that. And they got to really figure out what the quarterback position is, because we're going to talk about that shortly when I get to the Giants. But let's start with the Commanders first. And right now, if you go on FanDuel, they have the 7th best odds to win the Super Bowl. And they are minus 180 to be under 10.5 wins. So 10 wins is pretty much the bet. As it stands right now, if they don't sign Terry McLaurin, I don't know how they hit that. Obviously, and for that matter, let's talk about the flip on its head that Jaden Daniels has done for this organization, for this football team. This was a bad football team before Jaden Daniels. He brought them into a playoff team. It was really hot there. They beat the Detroit Lions. They lost to the Eagles, but they were a good football team because of Jaden Daniels. He was that X factor that they had. And, that's going to bring me to my dog tag first for the Commanders. And that is going to be Terry McLaurin. You might be shocked. Well, Terry might get traded. Yeah, if Terry's traded, I'm still super excited for Terry McLaurin. If Terry's a Washington Commander at the beginning of the season, I'm still excited for Terry McLaurin. Coming off a year, his best season was wide receiver 8 overall through 17 weeks, wide receiver 15 at 15.5 points per game. His second most receptions for his career and most TDs. Saw 23% of the target share last year. and was second in passer rating when targeted. So Jaden Daniels knows he's his number one guy. And if you're not paying Jaden Daniels as number one guy, what are you doing, right? Terry McLaurin, the Washington Commanders need Terry McLaurin more than Terry McLaurin needs the Washington Commanders. This has been a guy for fantasy who's been a wide receiver 2 / wide receiver 3 throughout his career. So there's consistency there. It's been a high end 3, low end 2. And then he's got 2 years sprinkled in there where he was a mid wide receiver 1 and a high end wide receiver 2. So this is a guy who showed consistency. He's been a safe player for fantasy football. This is a guy I'm super interested still, even at 29 years old, that I think can help you win for the next 2 to 3 years, no matter where he goes. His current ADP on Sleeper is 61.6. I don't really see that much of a drop off for Terry. Yes, wide receiver 7 might not might not happen again this year because he had 13 touchdowns. But let's be honest, his average for his career has been about 5, roughly, doing the math that I did. So don't really trust that, to be honest with you, with the math. He still would have been a top 24 wide receiver in points scoring, even without a total of 13 touchdowns, dropping it down to 5. He's still a wide receiver 2 for fantasy. So I don't understand really why we're panicking on Terry. He's been consistent. Even if you take some of his numbers away, he's still that guy. And, we're talking about 23% target share last year, which was, I believe, 34th in the league. We would obviously like to see that slightly higher, but there's nobody like Debo. I'm not afraid of Debo, right? I'm not afraid of Zach Ertz. He's still going to get his. Zach's still probably going to be worth of a tight end screamer in fantasy for a year, for redraft, or even in win now purposes. Zach Ertz could be another decent stream. But Terry McLaurin is this Washington Commanders receiving core guy, like pass catching guy. You need to bring him in for Jaden Daniels. Again, 135.3 passer rated when targeted. Terry McLaurin, you need to bring him in. There's no reason you shouldn't. If he gets moved elsewhere, he's still a very comparable wide receiver 2 for any offense. He could go to, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. It's going to be tough. But, Atlanta with Michael Penix and Drake London and be completely, a very nice fit there, especially with Mooney's injuries. He could go to, I'm sorry, I'm spitballing here. It's kind of hard, but Terry McLaurin in any offense is still safe to me as a wide receiver 2. I'm still willing to pay that Lay's first price for him. Some of the prices I've seen for him on dynastydaddy.com, which, by the way, is a good website to use for trade databases. I've seen him go straight out for Chuba Hubbard. I'm going to take the floor / upside of Terry McLaurin over Chuba. This one's going to be disgusting, as I just talked about last week, how much I don't like this player. Joe Mixon and Terry McLaurin for Jerry Jeudy and Ollie Gordon. Both of those guys, I'm not really. 3 of those 4 guys I'm not really in on, but give me the upside of Terry McLaurin over Jerry Jeudy. That might be a hot take at this point because everybody loves Jerry Jeudy. Everybody's faded off of Terry McLaurin. But, one thing Terry McLaurin has that Jerry Jeudy, 2 things Terry McLaurin has that Jerry Jeudy does not have is a quarterback and consistency throughout his career. So in that case, I'm saying do not fall into the trap of being afraid of touchdown regression or scoring less touchdowns, whatever the hell you want to call it. Do not fear that. Terry's been very good throughout his entire career. Do not fall into it. My doghouse for the Commanders, and I kind of was, mentioned it a little earlier when I talked about the Brian Robinson trade. Bill Krosky-Merritt or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has gotten a lot of buzz because he's looked really good in training camp. I can't deny he's looked solid, and I can't say that I watched a ton of his film because he had an eligibility issue in 2024 there, so there wasn't much available to our viewing eye. But I think we are putting the cart before the horse on this one because I don't think he's the workhorse back. Good play on words there in this offense right away, right? I've seen him moved for 2nd-round picks already this offseason, and this is based off of 18 carries, 70 yards, and 1 TD, 3.9 yards a carry, 3 receptions, 8 yards in 2 games. This is what you're trading him for. A guy, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt or Bill, the internets have been playing that one off a lot. Bill Krusky Merritt, has who was either undrafted in your rookie drafts or one of your last few picks. Your return on investment on that, getting him for a second-round pick, is screaming value. That is exactly what you need to be doing if you have Merritt. Obviously, you want him to be that guy. Everybody's looking for your next Bucky Irvings, those late round picks, but we're talking about a guy drafted in the 7th round compared to a 4th round pick in Bucky Irving. But Bucky Irvings just don't fall out of the trees. To be honest with you, I am not a guy who is super interested in Ja'Cory at all. I think the hype has gotten a little bit out of control. He had a really nice run last week against Cincinnati. But if you go back and watch it, first of all, we need to talk about how bad Cincinnati's defense is. And that's just kind of getting glossed over because we're hype about Bill right now. And I think that's fair. But that Bengals defense is horrendous. That the Bengals defensive line is bad without Trey Hendrickson. So we got to take a little bit with a grain of salt when it comes to Bill's play in this last game. He also doesn't offer much in the pass catching side of his repertoire. In 6 years in college, he had 34 receptions, 313 yards, and 2 TDs through 6 years. That is a bit down because of his eligibility issue. In 24, he had 0 receptions. He only played 1 game, I believe. So, but his high for his career reception-wise is 12 in college. So he's not really bringing you that PPR upside that you're hoping for. I think that, he's going to be a decent between the tackles runner. He actually has a little bit more juice than just a guy who has between the tackles, but he can break it to the outside. I do see some nice movement skills from some of the things I watched from him from this preseason. I do think we're getting a little out of hand with what we've seen so far. Again, this is a guy who's 7th round pick, undrafted in your rookie drafts, or late round pick in your rookie drafts that's going now for a second. I am absolutely doing that 100 times out of 100. And if I end up falling flat on my face because of that, at least I know I have a shot with a higher upside guy in the 2nd round of 2026. Even 2027, if you can get a 2027 second, I'm all aboard that, because any chances of ammunition I can get to bring Jeremiah Smith or Cam Coleman or any of those guys, TJ Moore, to my teams, I'm all in on that, or more ammo to move up to get those guys, I'm all in on that. So if you could trade him for any second right now, I'm all about doing that. And then they're talking about how they like Chris Rodriguez as the replacement to Brian Robinson, who's just a strong runner. Chris Rodriguez has the most 100-yard games in Kentucky history, a guy who's averaged 6 yards a carry throughout his college career. I believe it was 4.8 in his NFL career. Mind you, he doesn't have a whole lot of NFL usage right now. He has been a guy who's, I believe, been cut or put on the practice squad before, but the Washington Commanders keep bringing him back. That's nothing to really just kind of sneeze at. They're bringing him back for a reason. If you can get him off of your waivers, I'd be interested in doing that. And then there's Austin Eckler, who's still there. Father Time, who's kind of caught up to him a little bit. Wiz from the Dynasty DNA podcast, my co-host at the Triple Threat podcast. Make sure you follow him and follow that Dynasty DNA podcast as well. Has been saying that Eckler is a very cheap buy this offseason for a while now. And I'm starting to teeter on that a little bit. I was very against it in the beginning. I'm still kind of against it, but he is the best pass catcher in that rotation of running backs right now, by far. Right? I don't think Rodriguez really has that in his game. I don't obviously just talked about how I don't think Ja'Cory Krusky Merritt has that either. So for a contending team, if you want to give it a shot on Austin Eckler, I don't hate it, don't love it, but we're trying to win at the end of the day. So I think Eckler is the better value, and if you can get Rodriguez off the waivers for free, and then if you could trade Merritt for any second, make sure you are doing that as soon as possible, right? Don't waste any time. I think we are overhyping this preseason, and that's obviously, I've talked about it here. I've talked about it on Twitter. We obviously want to have as much fun as possible with training camp. We want to have as much fun as possible preseason because it is football, right? And a lot of these guys are, working their asses off for jobs that we can't really get too overblown with a lot of things. right? I'm going to talk about a rookie here that, I did like in a few seconds that I did like coming out of the draft, who went to an okay spot that is getting some buzz right now, but I still want to be a little cautious, but we'll see. Well, actually, let's just get into that right now. My dog tag for the New York Football Giants for Dynasty is Jackson Dart, Ole Miss quarterback. Speaking of which, let's bring up the player profile that Rich made. Rich made this one. This is the card that we made for his profile. Rich and I were doing that all last season. Make sure you're keeping an eye out for this offseason. We're going to do it more. We're going to be more ahead of the game this year. So here are some of the things that we liked on Jackson Dart: arm strength, accuracy, frame, athleticism. Some of the cons. Mostly it was the Ole Miss offense that scared us the most when it came to Jackson Dart. And to be honest with you guys, from the things that I've watched when it comes to Dart is, Brian Daboll has made this a very Ole Miss, very quarterback-friendly offense for Jackson Dart when he's out there, right? A lot of the things that I'm seeing are Jackson Dart getting the ball out quickie. A lot of hurry-up offense. A lot of just, first read, bang, getting it out. But we're also seeing him go through some progressions, getting into the second, third read, stuff like that. So, again, I don't want to overblow this because it's preseason. But Jackson Dart, to me, has shown, and this offense that this offense in Brian Daboll has shown that they are willing to do what Jackson Dart does best. And that's what I love, by the way, is when you fit your offenses or your team designs around your quarterback or around your playmakers. You say, this is what you do best. Let's build around that instead of trying to put in a square peg in a round hole. And a lot of offenses that we've seen, not even just the quarterback position, any position, going back to Philadelphia Eagles, DeMarco Murray, not the best outside zone runner. Chip Kelly just really loved running him to the outside. That was against what DeMarco Murray did best. But everything I've seen this offseason or this preseason, these 3 games from Dart, has been exactly what we wanted to see, on time, hurry up offense, nice passes. Some of the, like I said, looks to be in command. PFF grade of 88.5 through 3 games. Again, preseason. Don't want to overblow that, but it's solid. Has rushed a bit, 52 yards in 3 games. He's had two plays, I believe, of over 20 yards rushing. So that's positive. One thing I will say is Jackson Dart needs to learn how to fucking slide, because that dude, he took a header to the ground yesterday during that game, and he was put in the blue tent. You could even see the gif of him telling them to hurry up, trying to get through that examination. But if he slides, that doesn't happen, right? So that's one thing we got to worry about with Jackson Dart. And if you took advantage of the late second or the late first, early second round pick in Jackson Dart, you are probably really happy right now, right? Because we've fallen into this trap of, Michael Penix last year was either late first, early second. Bo Nix, same thing. Jackson Dart was one of those guys this year. Obviously, he was picked by the New York Giants, a pretty bad team right now. But I'm very interested to see what he looks like. His current ADP is 102.7. He's going around Tua Tagovailoa, right? And if you're looking for a QB3 and you're pretty good at quarterback, you've got, a Joe Burrow and a Caleb, you went first round, second round quarterback, or a Burrow and a Herbert, and you're looking for a third guy, I'm going Jackson Dart over Tua, to be honest with you, because you've got the rushing upside. You've got it's a rushing upside. You don't have the injury history of Tua as well. So if you're banking on Dart to be your third quarterback, I think that's very possible, or that's a very solid move, a smart move. If you could flip Tua for Dart at this point to a contender, I would try to do that. It might not happen, but you might as well take a shot in the dark, especially with the positivity that's around Dart right now. One thing I did forget to mention is the Giants are plus 100 to be over 5.5 games. So the smart money is saying that they're going to be a 5-win or less team, which, makes me think if Brian Dable wants to keep his job, he's going to put Jackson Dart out there as early as possible, because he could say, hey, we were bad, but, the guy I drafted, the guy I wanted, looked solid towards the end of in the season. So let me build upon that. Let me, build this offense around Jackson Dart. Let me show you what my system can do with this quarterback. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. I do think we see Jackson Dart at some point, maybe sooner rather than later. I say probably by week 6, depending on how bad the Giants really are. And I don't expect them to be a very good football team. I think that they are going to want to see what they have in this rookie. And again, this could help save Brian Dable's job, which leads me to my dog house for the New York Football Giants. And that is going to be Russell Wilson. Again, I don't think Russell Wilson has looked particularly that bad. I think he's looked okay. He looks solid, especially some of those deep throws he had. That moon ball to Bo Collins 2 weeks ago was just an absolute thing of beauty. It was a great throw. But again, I just talked about how this team is going to be bad, right? Jackson Dart is waiting in the wings, right? Russell Wilson is not going to save Brian Dable's job. I pretty much are copying and pasting what I said about Daniel Jones saving Shane Steichen's job. You could pretty much copy and paste that to Brian Dable. Russell Wilson's not going to save Brian Dable's job. Jackson Dart can, because if Jackson Dart comes out and looks solid, he could, Dable could get another year. Why? I'm kind of avoiding Wilson, right? If I'm going to go in the realm of extremely cheap, older quarterbacks, if I were to put the tier of 3, question to you guys, question to myself is Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, or Aaron Rodgers. I think, to me, if I were to put those 3, because they're all around the same value, they're all older quarterbacks that are pretty much at the tail end of their career. And if you're a contender, you probably would like to have one of these guys in a break in case of an emergency type situation. They're all roughly about 3rd-round picks at this point or later. I would rank it Aaron Rodgers, as disgusting that is to say. I would say, because we've seen Rodgers, he had an okay season last year. I'm not super interested in him, but in the rankings of these 3, it would be him first. Joe Flacco's second, because there's not a Jackson Dart breathing down his neck right now. Shador has looked good, but Shador got hurt, and we haven't seen much of him. So let's see how he bounces back, right? I think Flacco starts. I would argue Flacco starts probably longer than Russell Wilson this season. And then Russell Wilson, I would rank 3rd. And these are 3 guys that you can get for those 3rd-round picks. I would, if I need another quarterback, a 3rd quarterback, I would rank it Rodgers, Flacco, Russ. And that's just based on the teams that are around them, who they have behind them, because there's nobody in Pittsburgh right now. I like Will Howard, but he's been hurt too. I think Will Howard maybe could be the Brock Purdy of this year's draft. Who knows? I have no idea. We haven't seen him yet. So that remains to be seen. I think Shador could eventually take Joe Flacco's job, but I don't think that happens right away. I don't even know if it doesn't happen until the end of the season, right? I think obviously Kevin Stefanski is also coaching for his job, but they drafted 2 rookie quarterbacks that, maybe it's Dylan Gabriel, maybe it's Shador. I think Shador's better than Gabriel, so I think Flacco is going to get the first crack, and then I'm confused after what happens after that. And then when it comes to Russ, Jackson Dart's there. He has 1st-round capital behind him. He's looked good so far. He looks like he operates that system well. So Russ, out of those 3 veteran quarterbacks, will be my sell. I would sell Wilson for any 3rd, especially as a rebuilder. I would flip him for one of those 2 quarterbacks, even if I can get a plus on top of that. I think that's for Flacco. I think that's still possible. I put a poll out on Twitter. It was roughly close. I believe it was 58 to 42% of the votes went to Russ. Who would you rather have for your dynasty rosters for this year? Russ did win that. So if you can get a slight something on top of Joe Flacco to get Russ off your roster, I would do that because I think Jackson Dart is going to be in sooner than any of the two quarterbacks in Cleveland. And there's nobody behind Rodgers, unfortunately. So let's get into the Dallas Cowboys, the craziness that is the Dallas Cowboys. And we are going to start with the dog tag first. And that's going to be one Dak Prescott. Obviously, older quarterback. This is a contending guy only because he is 31, if I'm not mistaken. By the way, Cowboys are minus 120 to be over 77.5 wins. So they are smart money to be at about 8. They got to figure out what's going on with Micah fucking Parsons first before I bet that. Obviously, I'm never betting for the Cowboys to win games, but that's besides the point. Dak currently quarterback 21 at 76.1 ADP. He is going in the back of the 6th round, which I think is extremely good value for your quarterback 2, who has quarterback 1 upside as a pass thrower. He does have a little bit of rushing upside to his game that might be slightly less now as he's getting older, but he does, and he might actually, now that I think about it, he might have to rush for more because they don't have a fucking running game behind him. So that's going to be pretty interesting to see how that plays out. But before he got hurt, he was QB 18 before the injury, 16 in points per game, which is very solid quarterback 2 numbers. Superstitious about, playing fantasy football and Dak Prescott in general. Every other year since 2019 has been bad and then good, bad, then good, bad, then good. So they just had a bad year last year because of an injury. That means Dak's due for a good season, right? And that's just being silly. But in reality, this is the best set of pass catchers Dak has probably had with CeeDee Lamb, the addition of George Pickens, which, mind you, George was almost my dog tag for this episode. And I think he would have been if Rich was on the episode because that would have been a larger argument because he hates George. I'm a big George believer. But, the addition of George Pickens cannot be understated for Dak's fantasy value and dynasty value as a contending team, because I think he could have one of his best. Oh, and Jake Ferguson too. Sorry, I went on a tangent about George Pickens. I really think Dak can, be a quarterback 1 again. I could see at the worst quarterback 15, at the best quarterback 8, quarterback 7. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot. I think that the addition of George Pickens adds a deep presence to this offense and opens everything up for CeeDee Lamb, and that tandem should work well together. If you could still get Dak for a late 2026 first, I'm all about doing that. If you have to throw a 3rd on top of it to get it done, I'm all about doing that. I think Dak, as much as I hate to believe it or hate to say it, is primed for one of his best seasons because of the additions that they've made to this offense from pass catching aspect. From what we've seen from Dak from historic basis has been pretty good as well. So I'm all in on Dak, especially at the 6th round and as a late first contending buy. But my doghouse for the Dallas Cowboys is something I kind of mentioned previously, just a few seconds ago. And the entire running back room, this is a fucking cop-out answer, I guess. But I have no interest in any running back currently on the Dallas Cowboys roster. Everyone's going to tell me, oh, what about Jaden Blue? He's an explosive playmaker, a good, playmaking running back that has a pass-catching background as well. Maybe he's the guy. Jaden Blue started this training camp with work ethic concerns, right? Don't love to hear that. He has put a pin in that. He has looked good this preseason, this training camp from all accounts. I still do have some concerns about him. I don't think he's better than a rotational type running back. And obviously, we just talked about Charbonnet. In a rotation, he's going to be, a very good piece. But he's not on Charbonnet's level, right? And the the Dallas Cowboys do not have a guy in, Ken Walker's level either, right? So, the Cowboys at one point had DeMarco Murray and Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was the rotational guy, but he was very good. They don't have that. Jaden Blue is a poor man's Tony Pollard, and they don't have a Zeke for him to benefit off of, right? So this is a guy who's never carried a full workload in his college career, averaged 12.4 carries last year in the Texas offense. I think that there are other running backs that I would have rather taken in that third, fourth round. The Brashard Smiths, the Damian Martinez's have a little bit more workhorse, a little bit more playmaking ability, a little bit more an opportunity to get a higher workload than Jaden Blue. So I don't have a whole lot of interest in him. Javonte Williams was just god awful last year, right? 3.7 yards a carry with a really good offensive line. The saving grace for Javonte is his pass catching ability, but the pass catchers in Dallas right now with George Pickens and Jake Ferguson and CeeDee Lamb, especially the hyper targeted CeeDee Lamb, I don't think Javonte sees as much pass catching work as he's had in the past. He just looks like a shell of himself. We were all excited about Javonte Williams. If you could sell him off for a third, I'm all about it. If you could package him in to, maybe a third, him and a third for, I don't know, Jaylen Warren, maybe, or if you can even flip him straight up for Jaylen Warren, because there are some people that are not high on Jaylen Warren. I would try to do that. I don't think Javonte has the juice anymore. I don't think he could be a, consistent fantasy starter in your offense. He might have some flex appeal here and there because of the pass catching work. But again, I just stated how that the pass catchers in Dallas are high target earners, especially CD. So I don't have any interest in him. And again, he just looked really bad with a good offensive line. So none. And Miles Sanders, man, he hasn't been the same dude since Philly. No interest in him whatsoever. He's borderline at this point, a roster clogger. Obviously, he's going to have some value as right now he's probably the RB2 in this offense, but wouldn't shock me if Jaden Blue was the RB2 before long in this offense. So he's close to cut status to me for Miles Sanders. So there's no real value to him trading away. So I'm avoiding this entire running back room for this Dallas Cowboys because there is no one on that team that gives me the confidence that they could be the consistent guy that can be, even the guy next year. I don't think any of these guys are the number one next year for that matter, not even this year. So there is no one on this offense from a runner that I'm excited about. And that leads me into the reigning, defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. And they are currently sitting at a third in Super Bowl odds and minus 130 to be under 11.5. So it seems like the smart money would be about 11 wins, which I think is definitely doable. Obviously, when you have a Super Bowl winning team the second year, their schedule is going to be a bit harder. So it could be more difficult than it's been for them. But let's start with my sell here, because obviously I'm an Eagles fan. Let's start a little negative for them first. And my dog house for the Philadelphia Eagles is going to be none other than Dallas Goedert, tight end. Want to talk about a guy that really is a super frustrating fantasy option and a super frustrating football player and all that, and for all that as well. Tight end 22 on Sleeper, going in the 163.6 range, ahead of Arroyo and Brenton Strange. I imagine if you could still flip Goddard for Arroyo or Strange, I'm doing that. My biggest thing with Goddard is he has never played a full season of NFL football in his entire career, right? Missed 7 games in 2024. 3 games in 2023, 5 in 2022, only missed 2 games in 2021. It's not terrible. Things happen, right? But he's just proven as an unreliable guy throughout his career. Yes, he ends up finishing as like a tight end one from total points scored, because when he's available, he is a solid pass catcher in this offense. Jalen does target him. He can make plays after the catch as well that are special. But I just can't, like, as an Eagles fan, he's super frustrating because you can never know when he's going to, fractures his forearm or breaks his leg. It's just all these things seem to happen to Dallas Goedert, and it's super frustrating. It's literally for him. It's head, shoulders, knees and toes, It's everything fucking possible for him. If you could deal him for 2/3 in tight end premium, or a late third, or mid second, I would do that. Or an early third, or a late second. I apologize. 2/3 in tight end premium, I would do it. And honestly, if you could tear down from a Dallas Goedert to like a Hunter Henry, who's never, like, they end up always finishing around the same, right? And Hunter Henry's a little bit more reliable at this point than Dallas Goedert is. If you could tear down and maybe getting a third on top of Dallas Goedert to get to Hunter Henry, and I imagine they're going to finish around the same, unless Dallas Goedert has this miraculous season where he's continuously healthy throughout the year, which I don't foresee that happening. I don't like gambling and get 4 injuries, but it shows that he's just not healthy. If you could tear down to a guy like Hunter Henry, I would absolutely get on doing that. If you could still flip him for an Elijah Arroyo, I would 100%. Everything I've seen from Elijah Arroyo at this point has been very solid. The team is very excited about having him. So I am willing to still flip and take a gamble on a rookie who's also had some injury concerns. But again, Dallas Goedert, when healthy, is a very solid fantasy tight end, but he's a sell for me because I can't trust him to be in my lineup week in and week out. My dog tag for the Philadelphia Eagles is a guy, if you go on FanDuel right now and bet that he has over 850 yards, it's -114. I would take that in a heartbeat. That is Devontae Smith, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. Currently still only 26 years old. Wide receiver 20 on Sleeper. He's ADP is 57.7, back end of the fourth. Wide receiver 24 in total points last year. Wide receiver 17 at 15.3 points per game, while missing 3 games last year. Everybody likes to forget that he missed 3 games last season. 2023, wide receiver 16, wide receiver 22 in points per game with 14. 2022, wide receiver 9, this is his big year, wide receiver 15 at points per game at 15.1. Devontae Smith is a very consistent 14 to 15 points per game. That's why, wide receiver 2 numbers. You're getting him around that wide receiver 2, and people just keep discounting him because he's the wide receiver 2 on this offense. All day, I'm taking the over on 850 yards receiving for him. I'm betting he gets, into that mid to early wide receiver 2, maybe even a back end 1 wide receiver finish this season if he plays all 17 games. I am 100% in on Devontae Smith. If he's my wide receiver 2, my wide receiver 3, I'm ecstatic, right? If he's my wide receiver 1, I'm hoping that all of my other wide receivers are pretty much around the same total or average points per game as Devontae, which averages out to be pretty solid. I think Devontae for that, 108, 109 price range is a great value, especially because of what we've seen from him. They talk about how this isn't a pass-friendly offense, but for fantasy points at 15.3 and 15.1 and 14 points per game, I'm pretty fucking happy about that, right? That helps you win weeks. Everybody wants these wide receiver ones. It doesn't always happen, right? You can't always acquire them. Devontae Smith is a great value right now in Dynasty, especially with a safe floor of 14 and 15 points per game year in and year out. Well, that will just about do it for this episode of the Dynasty Dogs, brought to you by the Double FU for you, the fantasy football universe. I'm your host, Michael Anthony. What I like to say at the end of every podcast is if you are struggling mentally, make sure you're reaching out to someone, friends, family members, could be me, doesn't matter, your pet. I talk to my pets all the time when I'm struggling. Just make sure you're doing that, because remember, somebody out there loves you. We love you, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.